of the day, I get the pleasure of speaking with Becky, who is the CEO of Indiegogo. And we're talking about Does Location Matter, which in our conversations so far, it seems like you've learned a lot in a short period of time to sort of inform your perspective on this issue. But before we talk about your personal story, which I do want to get into, let's just talk a little bit more broadly speaking. So what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges that have resulted from the transition to remote work that you feel like we're still kind of working through as a sort of working culture?
First of all, thanks for having me.
Of course.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I think what we've solved a lot of the day-to-day with Slack, with Zoom, with technology. How do we actually work? I think the things that we're still working through is that balance of what's missing from that remote, which to me, I started as CEO 3 months ago, and I felt I need to meet my direct reports in person and have that real conversation and get to know them. I feel that for brainstorming and creative sessions, that's really important. And so I think striking that balance or figuring out, what are those other things that we can do, not just for the day-to-day, but for the relationship building, the strategic planning, the brainstorming, things that are actually a little harder to solve. I think that's still out there.
Mm-hmm. So for all the challenges that you just outlined, though, what's the other side? What's the flip side? What's the motivation for continuing to pursue this remote work experiment, despite the fact that hopefully we don't necessarily have to for health and safety reasons right now?
Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of remote. At Indiegogo, we're fully remote. We've gotten out of our office space. You can live and work where you want. I know we said we'd talk about it, but for me personally, I'm a mom of 2 young kids. I live in Chicago. I grew up there, and that's kind of where my family and my community is. So, my husband and I made this decision. We want to choose where we want our life to be, and we would kind of design our careers around that versus the other way around. And I think a lot of people, with COVID and with what's gone on, have made that same choice now. So for us as a business, we're able to be just as efficient, if not more, on the day-to-day. Like I was saying, that's solved really well and really working well. And people can live the way they want to live and where they want to live, and we can expand our talent pool as well, and we can kind of like meet people where they are, and it's a huge employee value prop to our team, and to me personally as well.
Well, yeah, speaking of, you just mentioned you're based in Chicago. The company for a very long time before it was remote was not based in Chicago.
Correct.
So how important was the transition to remote work in terms of your ability to have your current position?
So the team decided to go fully remote before I was there. They went remote like everyone else in COVID and realized it was working for them. And so when this job opportunity came up for me, I don't think it would have come up in another time if it were 2 or 3 years ago and I was in Chicago. I just wouldn't have shown up in the search,
right.
Because it would have been looking for folks in San Francisco. And like I said, that was a decision that my family made to say, we're going to stay here. This is where we want to live. So, yeah, it's been, it has opened up for businesses. It has opened up the talent pool, but for obviously for people, employees as well, it has opened up the opportunity to work for different kinds of companies, that they might not have been exposed to otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. So you made a decision a long time ago that despite what the repercussions could be to your career, you wanted to live in Chicago, your family wanted to live in Chicago, and you felt like that was going to be a career sacrifice.
Yeah, we did.
And then remote work came along, and all of a sudden that sacrifice that you had made no longer was such a sacrifice.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we said, we thought, well, this is the trade-off and this is the decision. There's I'm in tech, and there's more options in the Bay. There's still, it's still a hub. And even as other cities have more going on, I still did feel at that time when we were considering that, like I would have more options. But hey, it's a different world. We really accelerated this, and it's great, I think.
And so what is your experience how does that inform the way in which you approach the employee population who are making similar decisions about where they want to live and where they want to work and what kind of sacrifices they might have to make in order to get, to prioritize one over the other?
Yeah, for me, I definitely take my personal experience into account, and I think it's closer and fresher having, I'm a new CEO versus, having someone sitting in that seat for longer. So I really do feel that employee experience. Yeah, I think that one thing we've been talking about is the burden is placed more on the managers and leadership. So I feel like the employee can live where they want, try to work where they want. There's a few requirements there. For instance, if we are going to get in person for strategy, that's something that everyone's probably going to have to figure out how to arrange, because that's a part of it. But for the most part, we can give that flexibility. The burden's on the management team to say, are we appropriately setting goals and guidelines and expectations and accountability to make that work? But we're of a culture where if someone's like, hey, I'm running out for a quick doctor's appointment, or my kid has like a recital in the middle of the day, like, okay, that's fine, of course. Like, you're a good performer, you're doing your job. I don't care that you're stepping out for an hour or two. It's totally fine. I have to do that sometimes too,
Right. So you came in, you said 3 months ago, you've been CEO, and before that you weren't with the company, but prior to your joining, they had made the decision to go fully remote, independent of, that wasn't your decision.
Yes, correct. That was already
in the works.
Yeah.
That probably made it easier, but
Yes.
was there still a sense of pushback from folks that had become accustomed to the hub in San Francisco, that had maybe worked at that office for a long time, that maybe wanted to go back and visit their old desk that they had before the pandemic? Was there this, did you have to get through the nostalgia, and was there any pushback from longstanding team members that were in their heads we're just taking a temporary pause from the office, not a permanent one?
Yeah, a couple things on that. So when I did first join, I came out to San Francisco. I wanted to meet we still have quite a bit of our employee base is there. People have moved. It's probably 2/3 now in California, and 1/3 has over the 2 years spread out. So I came back and we did like a coffee and donuts at the office, because we were just getting out of the lease at that point. And it was the first time a lot of people had been back in 2 years, and they were taking pictures, and they were like, this was my favorite conference room. Which was your favorite conference room? Like, oh, this was where, I don't know, there was like a dog that was always napping under this desk. We were a dog-friendly office. And so people got really nostalgic, and they wanted to go to lunch in their favorite spots. And it was really sweet. And so that part, for me to witness, because it wasn't my office, but I can appreciate it. I do think that was sad, a little sad for folks. And for the most part, what we see in the surveys, most people are really thrilled with it, and a few people do write back like, "This is hard for me. I don't know if I want to be remote. I might want to work for an office." And I think that we will start to see, again, people need to make the choice for what works for them, and I feel, and the company should be really clear with, its expectations and what it means to work there, and employees can choose that, or they can say, I really want to go somewhere that is in person, if that's what they need, socially, or what they're looking for.
Do you think that's where we're heading, or what's taking place, is this sort of self-selection where, my company's gone remote, I don't want to be remote, I'm going to switch companies, or vice versa, my company is demanding I come back in the office, I prefer to be remote, so I need to, is that what you're seeing?
I think so. I mean, I just anecdotally know so many people who are like, I'm remote and I'm never going back. You cannot, it's not happening, right? This works for my life, and I've had a taste of it, and I don't want anything else, and there's enough companies out there who can offer it, but it is a supply and demand thing. So it's been really easy to get a job for the past year. It's been hard to hire. So if that switches, maybe less power to make the choice. But if you're lucky enough to have a marketable job and you have choice, that's going to factor in like big time.
Well, as an employer, is that difficult for you to sort of be willing to let go of the employees whose your remote work culture doesn't work for them anymore? Is it tough for those people to sort of say, like, yeah, this isn't going to work?
this might be unpopular. It's not for me, but
Okay.
I feel like if this is what works for us. We obviously we listen to our employees in the surveys, and we talked about this a little bit, but we do so much to meet them where they're at. So we are launching. We have currently a pilot with WeWork. You can book your local WeWork and go in and have a place where you live. I go to the one in the West Loop in Chicago, and it's like in the tech scene, and it's so fun, and I get so much energy being there. We give people stipends for building out their home office and buying the things they need for their electricity and internet costs, for health and wellness. So we have repurposed the office budget to help make it work for people. But if somebody says, like, this isn't the way I want to live and the way I want to work, I don't fault them for that, and I don't. I think that's okay.
Yeah. It's not something you take personally.
No.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so there was also a lot of talk at the start of the pandemic, and still going on a little bit now, where a lot of employers are saying, you can leave San Francisco, but we're not paying you San Francisco salary anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pay you a salary that is appropriate for your cost of living. And there was a lot of talk about that earlier. It seems to have died down quite a bit. Where has the sort of employer community landed on that issue of adjusting salary based on location?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I was actually thinking about this even more in recent days. Like, there are companies that actually have been doing that for a really long time. A lot of big law firms and consulting firms and accounting firms have someone doing the exact same job that they pay different salary in different market, and that was normal. And still is. This, like, current, you're remote, but if you move, we're going to change your salary. That, I think, is what is new. To my knowledge, Google has gone out pretty publicly and said that's what they're doing. They're a very big company, and I suspect there's a huge operational burden to actually implementing that kind of a policy that smaller companies are not going to be able to take. Like, the amount of data and benchmarking that I know we go through to make sure we have pay equity, it's like so much work.
Yeah.
And so for companies to take on an additional burden of market by market and tracking, and that's quite a bit. So I'm not sure if we're seeing a reaction to just like the logistics of that, and maybe only the biggest companies can take that on. But I guess if I were like predicting the wind, I think over time, like, where you live, like, it's a market rate right now, but that's going to change. So software engineers who are really hard to hire, I'm not sure that their market rate is that different based on where they live.
Right.
And so over time, based on the position and the fact that more people are going to spread and go remote, like, the value of the job will just be the value of the job, I think. And I think that, like, kind of location-based market rate will even itself out and be less of a difference, that's my guess.
And so to recap, it's because there's so much work that goes into ensuring pay equity.
That's just one, like, actual logistic of why a company might have said they were going to and then not.
Right.
Whether it's the right thing to do or not is, like, a different question.
Right.
And again, I think we're seeing this, like, tide change towards I'll pay for the value of the role, and you can do it from wherever and whenever, and I'm not going to change that, what my value of your output is based on that. So that's maybe, like, the two sides of the coin. There's there's the theoretical, is this the right thing? Will the market allow for it? I don't feel in the long run the market would allow for it, is my guess.
Well, let's expand even further, because we're talking about moving from San Francisco to another, maybe neighboring state with a lower cost of living, or even another city in California. What about another country? What about other parts of the world? I don't know if you are hiring folks actively or currently outside of the United States, but do you think that location still matters in terms of nationality, or are we really reaching a truly global talent marketplace?
It's a good question. For me, I'm on the fence. I think that you need the ability to get in person when you need to. So it depends how much that matters. Like, I want to be able to say like, we're actually like stuck on something, a problem, and we did this last week. Like the week before, I said, we're not getting enough traction. Let's all get to Chicago. And like 5 of us flew in and we met. And so being close enough and available enough that works, again, is what works for me. I think every company's different. But if you're too remote, like on an island, and that is really hard, like there's just I think there's a logistical challenge. We definitely have international teams, and should those teams be kind of like, some people are doing this idea of like a hubs, and maybe they've got a couple cities where people can get together, or even like countries. Time zone is still a real challenge. Do you want to work fully asynchronously? There are companies who have solved for that, and everything is asynchronous. We're not there. We try to have certain hours in which we overlap, and that's when we schedule meetings, and then we try to be really cognizant of people's personal time. Like even coast to coast, it's a 3-hour difference. So I like to have dinner with my kids every night and pick them up from daycare, and West Coast is still working, and so they try to get their meetings in with me earlier in the day, and we try to accommodate. So it does get more challenging still when you go further out.
Yeah, and speaking of your family, because it seems like you've found a balance that works for you between managing, being an active member of your family, being an active CEO in your company. We were talking about this earlier. You've had 2 very different experiences with being a working mother with your 2 children at different times that they were born. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to have a child in a traditional office in-person setting versus more recently in a remote setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first is 4.5 now, and I went back into the office after 3 months, and it was, like a wonderful, supportive environment. And we had a mother's room, and I don't, if you've breastfed or you're nursing, you have to. It's just like a crazy logistical challenge, in addition to the emotional challenge of like, I'm leaving my baby, which is very hard, and I'm not diminishing that, but like there is a logistical challenge of pumping 3 times during the workday in a mother's room, and like it is very, it's like I'm just going to expose myself here. You are sitting in an office, in your office building, and you have to like take off your clothes and put on a contraption and try to like look at pictures of your baby that will make you cry a little because that helps milk. It's crazy. It's a horrible experience. And you've got people like slacking you, like, hey, can I stop by your desk? And you're like, I'll be there in a minute. And you're like doing this. It's awful. It was for me. It was not great. And like you cry over spilled milk and stuff. It's crazy. And so it was really hard. With my second, we were remote, and I just like put my camera off and like prayed that I wouldn't accidentally put it back on, and just like nursed at my desk and like had meetings, and she was there, and I was able to spend time, and like have lunch with her and nurse throughout the day and transition off the way I wanted to. And it was a much more peaceful transition for me. So that like as a mother and a parent, like being remote during that time is major.
Well, I can promise you most men don't understand.
No, that's why I paint the picture because like. It's crazy.
It sounds insane. And 100%. The fact that you can, just have a regular day with your baby, but also you're working and just turn the camera off, that seems so much more civilized and like productive and mutually beneficial for all parties, baby included.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad that we're reaching that point. Although there is a little bit of fear now that as the economy starts to change a little bit, as we perhaps are seeing perhaps a switch back from a candidate's market to maybe an employer's market in the near future, do you think we're going to snap back to a lot of those old structures? Do you think that employers are generally going along with this because they're in a very competitive talent market, but they're just waiting for that opportunity where talent is easy to find, easy to hire, and so we can create whatever kind of structure we want, which is, in most cases going to be going back to the previous norm?
I guess it depends on what the structure is that they want, first of all. I mean, I think there's plenty of companies that find that this works better for them, and they're going to stick it out. I also think it's like one of many levers, right? So maybe what you're seeing is companies who are paying like top salary are able to say like, I'll overpay you in exchange for you, like me taking this away,
Right.
or, I don't know, there's like that balance there, but yeah, in a market where salaries might start to come down, like salaries were going way up last year overall, then they're going to maybe start to come down if hiring's, not the same. Or like, I just feel like that's a balance, if that makes sense. And,
Well, yeah,
what do
no.
you have to offer you still have to recruit, and you
Right.
still have to be a good value to your employees, and you want them to love their job and create great value, so.
Well, if salaries are coming down and some employers can't afford to match the salaries of larger competitors, then does remote work become
It's a benefit,
yeah,
right?
it
It's like
levels the
one of
playing
many.
field.
You've got comp, and you've got medical, and you've got where you work, and that's
Right.
like it's a benefit.
It's now part of the employee package.
I think so.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. So we only have a couple of minutes left here, but I want to make sure that we focus on the topic that we are supposed to be talking about. Does location matter?
Yeah.
We've talked about your experience as an employer, as a CEO. For the average employee, we've talked a little bit about the idea of proximity bias, that in a hybrid setting or in a situation where you have the choice, you can come into the office or not, but decisions will be made, and you might not be in the room when those decisions are made, or you might not have as close of a personal relationship with your manager. Do you think that people who are really concerned about career progression, which is probably most of us, should maybe view the remote work through that lens? Do you think that remote work, and certainly making the decision to be more remote in a hybrid environment, could have negative implications for career progression?
I think hybrid's really challenging. I do think that, I have felt like I had times where I was on a team and they were all in another city, and I was in the office, but a different office. And that was really hard, like to be the one who's home or on the Zoom call and everyone else is in the room talking to each other. You can't like quite hear, they turn to each other. So like that kind of hybrid model is its own set of challenges. I feel when everyone's remote, it levels that playing field. But yeah, I do think that proximity is real. I think Slack proximity is a really interesting thing. Some people are just like the ones to jump in on the comments, and they're more loud in a virtual world. And the introverts can hide a little more at home, and that doesn't mean they're not as productive, but they're not as loud, and it's actually like even more work for them to get noticed in that. So I think there's challenges there that we need to, again, it's on managers to be thoughtful and make time equally with all of their employees to overcome.
Right.
I do think that's a real challenge.
So location doesn't matter necessarily, but it depends on the managers, the
It
organization.
has to be done right.
It has to
Yeah,
be done
I think you
right.
can make it work, and there's a lot we're doing to make it work. But I don't know that we're still at doesn't matter at all.
All right.
Yep.
That's a good place to leave it. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you so much.